One of the very popular Soviet and Russian propaganda techniques is to speak about happy childhood and happy youth, describing white winters, sledges, snowballs, tasty ice cream and friends and all of that, and trying to substitute your sweet and happy memories of childhood with the ideological regime, as if you were happy not because you were a child, but you were happy because you were a child in Soviet Union. Today in social media and other resources you can come across lots of videos and photos describing happy Soviet childhood. But was it actually happy? School is a very important stage in our childhood. And it's really good when we are able to feel happy during our school years. Of course there are problems, but it's really bad when these problems are created by your school. Soviet school was a totalitarian school. Children felt members of the system. And the more similar you are with your friends and comrades, the better you are. Uniforms, ideology, they were surrounded by various myths and had to follow strict rules. Obligations and duties were central in Soviet school, not rights or freedoms that children must experience as they grew up in beautiful adults. If you look at the portraits from school classes, you will see the majority of them are political, describing Lenin and Stalin as people who are still alive and the only idols that must inspire future of these children. Important stages that school children in the USSR had to pass were also very ideological. Entering the school, children became Oktyabrята, which is after the October Revolution, and they were introduced to small badges of stars with Lenin in the center. There are different rules of behavior for Oktyabrята which they had to fulfill. The next stage was pioneers. Pioneers wore a red chief to demonstrate that they belonged to communist children. And the next stage is Komsomol. It was vital for the successful future and entrance of the university. School curriculum had lots of political subjects. Political information was a part of the introduction of a week, where children had to describe their impressions on the decisions of the Communist Party. Many books were spiced with propaganda, and children were introduced to various communist heroes from different corners of the world. Another serious tragedy is that many of these books were based on the stories of betrayal. That is, children in that books, children heroes, reported their parents to KGB because, for example, these parents were prosperous peasants, kulaks, did not want to join the party or had other opinions. So the betrayal of parents was described as something positive and must have inspired these school children to repeat something similar if they doubt about the communist attitudes of their parents. And there were lots of examples where children reported their parents or grandparents about the visits to the church, different opinions, or maybe hiding money below the bed or something like that. Literary criticism was always present in Soviet schools. That is, when you read a book, you don't analyze it individually, but you read literary criticism, which tells you what heroes are good and what heroes are bad. And the more similar your opinion is, the better. Children had to feel they are a part of the system. They marched, they recited political poems, they wore uniform, and they were all connected in one chain of communist children who will grow up into communist adults. Forced child labor is another characteristic of a Soviet childhood. It was extremely important and popular to send children to work, and they did not receive any money for that. Many children were inspired to collect scrap metal, Waste paper, this was the only possibility, for example, to get access to the books you want to buy or something like that. Children were also sent to work on collective farms to gather tomatoes, for example, or to dig potatoes. This was the way to get some more food for a school canteen, and nobody asked, how do you feel in the sun, or how do you feel doing difficult job manually? Child labor was an important component of the Soviet economy and treated as something positive and very educative. But this was not a kind of intellectual work or something that could have inspired these children to become a professional in the future. It was meant to solve complicated tasks and to save money and time for other workers of the big industrial and agricultural Soviet Union. Forced child labor is a memory of millions of people who were traumatized by the communist regime. So after a difficult day at school, or maybe some labor in the fields or on collective farms, a Soviet child returned home. And here he or she encountered another problem: lack of personal space. You can watch our Soviet myth debunked video on life in Khrushchevka, and a typical Khrushchevka was really small. Soviet families lived in a two-room flat, and there could be like 3 children and grandparents and a father and a mother. So the majority of Soviet children did not have the room of their own, and they had to do their homework somewhere in the kitchen, accompanied by grandma cooking the soup. It did not inspire creativity, freedom, or independence of thought. That's why very often after a short break for doing homework or something like that, children escaped to the streets to play different games. And the majority of these games were pretty militarized. Soviet Union developed its myth of the great victor of the Second World War, and children were inspired and encouraged to play, to shoot guns. And if you look at videos from modern Russia, you will also be terrified at how popular various war games among Russian children is. Ideological books, ideological cartoons, ideological films were supposed to build an ideological child. Freedom of expression was forbidden and was treated as a symptom of something dangerous. Today you listen to jazz and tomorrow you will sell your motherland is a typical slogan of that times. Any kind of freedom in fashion, in music that you listen or books that you discuss was treated as a danger to the standard and systemized communist regime. So even chewing a gum could seem very rebellious. And chewing gums were a deficit, and there are lots of jokes describing like, you have chewed your gum, then pass it to your friend, because like you don't have many chewing gums to share. My name is Anna, and I'm from Ukraine. When this war with Russia started, I knew we will win, and I know it now. Because Russia behaves just like a bully, and bullies are always cowards. United with our allies, we will definitely win and return this world back to normal. Bullying was very common in Soviet schools, because they were concentrated not on developing personalities, creativity, freedom, and independence of thought, but they were concentrating on building similar citizens, warring citizens, of a very totalitarian country. Any kind of freedom was treated as danger, and those who wanted to be different were bullied. That's why we have a very traumatized post-Soviet Russian society. But Ukrainians will teach them how to live in a free and independent world.